Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth Digital Pan-Asian FP&A Board. And today we are going to talk about the very interesting subject from traditional to better and beyond budgeting. My name is Larissa Malnichuk. I'm Managing Director and CEO at International FP&A Board and FP&A Trends Group, and I'm here today to facilitate this interesting discussion. I welcome so many registrations around the globe. So right now we have around 500, Asian region 83%, and 45% of people are coming from CFO, finance director, and head of finance level, and 45% are from the middle level management. Amazing that we have also registrations from 39 countries today. Our global goal is to share the latest trends and developments about modern financial planning and analysis. And this is what we're going to do today. But let me quickly remind you about those subjects that we already covered in our face-to-face meetings in 5 Asian chapters, and those meetings that also we had face-to-face, the last 3 meetings, and today is the 4th digital meeting. Very quickly, about the agenda. So today, at the end of this webinar, you will look at the subject of Beyond Budgeting from 3 different aspects. So it will be introduction into the main principles, then the example of implementation, so Agile planning, incorporating Beyond Budgeting principles at Roche, Australia, their practical experience, and then the third aspect, we will look at the technology and how technology can enable the implementation of Beyond Budgeting principles. Of course, conclusions and recommendations, and we will have Q&A session as well. Now, I would like to ask our panelists to switch on their cameras and their microphones for people to see you. And we will start with quick introduction. It's amazing we have a panel that joins 3 continents today. Let us start from Richard Olsen, who is Managing Director at Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. So Richard is previously was Global Finance Director, Performance Strategy and Reporting at AstraZeneca. And Richard presents on a number of conferences on his favorite subject of Beyond Budgeting. And he presented in our Nordic FP&A boards in Copenhagen and in Stockholm, and a lot of experience on this subject. And today, Richard is going to talk about the main principles of Beyond Budgeting and how to implement it. Richard, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Richard joined us from Gothenburg, Sweden, by the way. So the second one is Stefan Plattner, who is Finance Director and Community Lead Future at Roche. So Stefan joined us from Sydney today, and he has a lot of experience in driving high-profile, transformational, innovative projects. And with Beyond Budgeting in his company, he was one of those leaders, and he's here today to share with us experience, those lessons, and advantages and disadvantages, and many other things that are shaping Beyond Budgeting implementation in a company like this. Stefan, you're welcome.
Thank you, Larissa, and really good to be here today.
Thank you, Stefan. The next speaker is Adri. Adri Devlichauer, who is also from the same company, from Roche. Adri is chapter lead business advisory at Roche, and she's going to share with us the process of implementation. It would be a presentation of Stefan and Adri about their experience. Adri is CIMA qualified accountant, and obviously FP&A, this is the area of your experience and interest. Adri, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. And then finally, we have Pras Chatterjee, who is joining us from Toronto, Canada. So almost night over there. Very grateful for your flexibility, Pras. Pras is a senior director at SAP, but previously he was a practitioner at a number of technology and global organizations, a lot of passion and experience in FP&A, in particular analytics. And today, Pras is going to share how technology can help to shape implementation of Beyond Budgeting for better budgeting. Pras, you're welcome.
Hi, Larissa, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much, panelists. So now you can switch off your cameras, and let me give a very quick introduction into my background. So I'm a CIMA qualified accountant. I'm also a certified FP&A professional. And with my company, International FP&A Board and FP&A Trends Group, I established FP&A Board in 27 cities, 16 countries on 4 continents. As I already mentioned, we have 5 chapters in Asia, and we hope to start traveling again in July for face-to-face meetings. So there are a lot of things that we do at International FP&A Board and FP&A Trends Group, but the latest one, we started to share the best practice workshops and consultancy projects as well. So this is about your webinar, what we're going to do today. So your participation is welcome. We will have 4 polling questions today. There will be interactive Q&A session, so please use the chat box as soon as you have a question. And don't worry if there are too many questions, because we will be able to share those questions and send them back to you through email. Networking is important, so please join our LinkedIn, invite us to join on LinkedIn. Presentations are available right now as a handout to this webinar, but we will send this to you as well together with recording in 2 days. And at the end of the session, we always welcome a brief survey where you can share with us how we can be better. And before we start, I really would like to say thank you so much to our global partner and sponsor, SAP, one of the world's leading provider of modern FP&A solutions. SAP, thank you so much for making this possible for us to travel the world, to share this with so many people around the globe. Thank you so much. And just a quick introduction from my side. So as a former practitioner, as the person who was driving FP&A process around the globe with my previous organizations, I really like this introductory slide. This is the indication of the problem of traditional budgeting. We call this hockey stick forecasting, and normally this is what's happening. So we have our starting point, but we never give up about our budget, and we start to create this hockey stick. So that definitely the miracles and problems are starting over there. So if you have your forecasting process, something like this, so probably you need to think about the modern ways how we can avoid it. Beyond budgeting, the subject that is not new, but obviously last year in March, so many of us found ourselves with budgets that are absolutely unrealistic, forecasts that don't make any sense, and so on and so forth. So beyond budgeting is on the rise at the moment. People thinking how we can replace our traditional processes. And there will be introduction from Rikard, and there will be examples from our panelists. But I really like this quote from thought leader in Beyond Budgeting, Bjarte Bognes, who was, by the way, speaker at our previous event in Switzerland. So it's a great quote that gives a definition of Beyond Budgeting. So the main purpose of Beyond Budgeting is liberation from dictatorship, micromanagement, number worshipping, calendar periods, hierarchies, secrecy sticks, and carrots. So this is a quick definition, but let us see what it is in reality. We have 1.5 hours to find out. And today we are going to look at this subject from 3 different aspects. I already shared this with you. So introduction, implementing, and technology as enabler. But before we do this, I really would like to have this quick check and feedback from you. We would like to launch our first polling question, and we would like to hear what is your current annual budgeting process. I'm launching the poll, and I would like each one of you to share your experience. Please choose one of those options. Please start vote right now. How long is your current annual budgeting process? annual budgeting or budgeting and planning process? Is it less than 1 month? Is it between 1 and 3 months? Is it between 4 and 6 months or over 6 months? Or maybe you are one of those organizations that already don't use the budget, or maybe you never use the budget. So it's also possible. Please continue to vote. More than 55% of you voted. 60%, almost 65%, just a few seconds, and I'm closing the poll. And I'm sharing the results with everyone. So less 3% of you have a fantastic process, which is less than 1 month. For big organizations, it's a huge achievement. Almost 50% of you have a process that is between 1 and 3 months. 30% of you have a process between 4 and 6 months in duration, and 9% of you have the process which is over 6 months. But actually 8% don't have budget at all. Rikat, I would like your commentaries.
Thank you very much, Larissa. Of course, I think it's very nice to see that 8% of you is actually not doing budgets, but I'm equally interested to understand those organizations that actually spend more than 6 months of producing a budget that is often for 12 months. So you spend almost as long planning for that as you follow up to it. And of course, you see some of the organizations being very quick and efficient in doing their planning with less than 1 month. But in conjunction, most of you actually work at least a couple of months with this budget. Thank you.
Thank you for your commentary, Rikat. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thank you to all of you who participated at this voting, more than 65% of you. What I want to say from my side, it's amazing how our global world is consistent, because this is the statistics that we get from around the globe. Doesn't matter whether it's in Asia or in North America or in Europe or in the Middle East. So this is typical, but the situation is changing. Only 5 years ago, there would be more people that have a budget process between 4 and 6 months and even more, you know. But I can see the improvements from year to year. I'm hiding the results, and now this is a great starting point for us to look at the first aspect of Beyond Budgeting. Let us have this quick introduction from thought leader, from managing director of Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. Rikat, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Larissa, for the opportunity to speak here. And what we will actually do, Larissa, with these polls, as we are doing them for many of the FP&A boards, we will actually be introducing a global poll that you can see the global results as and when we have finalized them, which will be interesting for you. So I'm the managing director of the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. It is a membership organization. We have 50+ members all around the world, and we also do some advisory and some training sessions. But let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the budget. So I will actually start a bit with a history lesson. It could always be fun to see where we're coming from. And here you can see two people, a building and a book, and they sort of form what we today use as one of the most common management processes in all organizations around the world, the budget. On the left-hand side, you will actually see an old English king, Charles II. He was king in England at the same time as the English Parliament was founded. And the king and the Parliament, you know, they divided up their operations so that the king spent the money, and he spent it mostly on wars with France, building castles and having parties, almost to the extent that the English fleet was owned by Dutch merchants. The topic of the English Parliament was to take in taxes from the people. And of course, the Parliament thought that the king was spending the money in the wrong places. So we needed to have a document, a signed document between the two parties to make this power balance conflict go away. That document, where the king should spend the money, was signed by both parties and brought from the Parliament to the king in a French leather bag. And the name of that French leather bag was the bouchet, and that's where the name the budget comes from. So it actually was to solve a power balance conflict. The second thing is is the French Parliament building. So what happened in France in the late 19th century was two things. First of all, in the French mining industry, Henri Fayol and others started what we would call the administrative tasks. He created controllers, he created human relations people, etc. And here is when it come in that we needed people spending 4 or 5 years at universities to learn to do the budget. And the French government also said we need to have the budget equal to the fiscal year, almost then to the January and December. So it had nothing to do whatever with the rhythm of industries or rhythm of organizations. The last picture is probably the most influential man on how you do your budgets today. It's Mr. George McKinsey and his book Budgetary Control from 1923. So it's almost 100 years old. And if you look at that book, it reckons very much with how you would, in many organizations, write your budgetary instructions for the year, with a very much focus on cost control, variance analytics, and a very much top-down coordination. And what you can see here, we are using innovations that is 300 to 400 years old, and the latest innovation was actually 100 years ago. So we can go to the next slide. So in the late 19th, then a number of researchers, Jeremy Hope and Robin Fraser, actually went out to some companies to see why were they more profitable over time than many of the others. And they found out that numerous traits on these companies, one of them being less focus on budgeting or actually having no budgets. There were other traits there as well, and that is very important to understand that the Beyond Budgeting concept is actually a very holistic concept. And to show that, we can go to the next slide, Larissa. Because the next slide shows the principles, the Beyond Budgeting principles, the 12 principles. And as you can see, they are addressing both leadership as well as management processes. We as FP&A professionals might work mostly on the right-hand side, on the management processes, although that you will see, for instance, in the Roche case, we shouldn't shy away and forget the leadership principles. And here you can see on the leadership principles some interesting things about the purpose, the values, and transparency. And that will definitely come back within the Roche case. But if you go back to the management process as our core as FP&A professionals, you would see that we have a very different view on the rhythm, that you should organize yourself along the organization's rhythm rather than the tax year. You should set targets in a very holistic and ambitious way. And your plans and forecast needs to be very much unbiased and an ongoing process, rolling forecasts, for instance. And we will also talk very much different about resource allocation, saying that the budget might not be the best way actually to allocate resources. And the two, number 11 and 12, as you will see, we will actually move into something that in many companies are the homeland of the human resources departments, in how you evaluate performance and how you do your rewards. And I think that is a very good way of looking at this from a holistic way. So if we then move on to the next slide, Larissa, and move in a bit more than to the FP&A professional and how you can help in transforming this. You can see on the top and bottom, you would all come with the information and systems, and Pras will come back to talking about that later on. And of course, we need to have the leadership, the organization, how we are organized, and the leadership principles. But at the core of an FP&A professional's work, I think there is two ways to start, one way to start. And that is to separate what we normally see as the purpose of the budget, setting targets, do a forecast, and take decisions about resource allocation. But when you separate this, you can actually let them be optimized for their actual purpose. So you can let the targets be optimized to understand what we want to happen, and the forecast to be optimized for what we think will happen. And just that small wording change will actually be a very good and a very important change in how you operate and how you actually do your forecasts and your target setting. And a very important thing is also that you need to allocate your resources based on strategy rather than what you might do previously on last year's budget or anything like that. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you can also see some words that would help you. Targets can be ambitious, whilst forecast needs to be fully unbiased. Target should be relative and with a holistic perspective. And forecasts, of course, need to have the limited details and be produced in a very efficient way. And the decisions about resource allocation actually should be continuous, not that you put your entire investment or other resource allocation processes in place, for instance, in October. So we can go to the next to last slide, because this one tries to outline, the next slide tries to outline what this means for the FP&A professional. It needs that you would need to work with other techniques for evaluating performance rather than the old-fashioned variance analytics. You need to do trend analytics, rolling trends, etc. You need to combine your financial acumen with deep business acumen. If you are to produce a driver-based rolling forecast, you actually need to understand the drivers of your business. And vice versa. By doing this, you will probably have more financial acumen with your business people. You need to create much more agile planning process. You probably all fully realign your forecasting processes and thrown away your budget in the year of 2020. And you need to continue to build that one into your normal way. You need to collaborate more with other central functions. I've named a few, HR, but probably also procurement and IT. And that falls into the next slide, where you need to have the rewards and awards. And the last one, you probably need to be a bit more smarter how you produce your financial numbers. And the last slide, there are loads of companies on this journey. Some of them are members of the Beyond Budgeting Roundtables, and some are just part of our community. And we would be happy to invite you to join our community. And with that one, Larissa, I think my introduction is over. So over to you again.
Rikard, thank you so much for this excellent introduction to Beyond Budgeting process, for sharing these 12 principles and the message of importance of separation. In FP&A, those people that are responsible for the budget, you know how people mix the terms of budgeting, forecasting, planning, and how very often the process is combined. I would like to ask our panelists to switch on their cameras and to give their commentaries. Stefan, you are the first. We can see your company Roche at this list. So what would be your addition to this introductory presentation?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Rikard, for this very informative introduction to Beyond Budgeting. And, you know, so much what you have laid out here, what needs to be done, resonated very, very well with me. And I think also with Adri. You know, we did a lot of experience exchange within Roche with all the affiliates who implemented Beyond Budgeting principles. And what we all concluded was there is not one silver bullet here. It's really, you need to get a couple of things right to really move the needle and to really see the impact. And so you talked about, you know, how important these leadership principles are, and, you know, the other principles around the rhythm, performance evaluation, rewards, and many others. So I think later in our presentation, Adri and I can share some practical experience, how to get there. So thanks for this nice introduction.
Thank you, Stefan. Adri, would you like to add something?
Thanks, Larissa, and thank you, Rikard, for the really insightful presentation. I think firstly for me, I'm really glad that we live in an era where we can move away from that really traditional budget process that was set hundreds of years ago. And I would say for me, probably one of the most significant changes through this process, and that was really reflected in your presentation as well, is just the language change, where we start focusing on ambitious targets and realistic forecasts, and actually starting to differentiate between those two and value the gap, because that really helps you to focus in different areas as well.
Thank you, Adri. Thank you. And Pras, what would be your vision on this first presentation? Your additions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rickard. I think your presentation definitely resonates to everybody, and especially the 97%. I think that said they spend more than 1 month doing their budgeting and forecasting process. I especially love the part about when you talked about your management process, about having everything in rhythm, and I think it's about the rhythm and understanding the moment. As you pointed out, 2020 was hopefully an anomaly for all of us. I mean, it didn't reflect anything to do with 2019. There might be some impact on 2021. But organizations that spend their time budgeting and forecasting really and working in a rhythm and in a manner such as that, they're able to probably capture the moment and really reflect the situation versus adhering to some sort of paradigm that is completely outdated and makes no sense in the current time. But thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Pras. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Rickard, for this excellent start of our meeting. And now this is the timing for us to hear from the practitioners. I'm launching the next polling question. Panelists, you can switch off your cameras now. And this is the second polling question, and I would like to ask you to vote. And it's about where you are in your organizations right now in terms of beyond budgeting process. Maybe you already started this journey, or you're just thinking about this, or you're not considering this at all. I wouldn't be surprised that actually in some of the countries, the concept is quite new and maybe not so, people don't know much about this yet. So please continue to vote. I can see that almost 50% of you voted. Just a few seconds, please continue to vote. Very interesting results so far. And I'm closing the poll and sharing results with everyone. Yes, interesting. So 30% of you not considering this yet, 44% thinking about this. It's a great result. And 27% already started. Oh, wow. I'm surprised. Rickard, any commentaries, please?
I'm both surprised and both happily surprised, I must say, Larissa. I think this is the sort of the best numbers we've actually had in any of our sessions so far, and we've, as you said, we've traveled the world in doing this stuff. So I'm actually very happy to see this result, and hopefully after this session, the 30% not considering it will actually move into the 44% or the 27% that is thinking or starting it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your commentary. Stefan, commentary from you, please.
Yeah, same for me. I'm really super happy to see that, a third almost is starting a beyond budgeting journey. And then, a lot of colleagues here thinking about it. I think these are really great results, encouraging results. It's really good to see.
Thank you. Thank you for all of those voters for sharing your journey, your experience with us. I'm hiding the results. And now this is a great timing for us to look at the case study of implementing beyond budgeting. And before doing this, just a few words about what is happening around the globe. We had these face-to-face discussions in many countries, in practically in all our 27 chapters around the globe. And you know what? Very often practitioners, CFO and finance directors, they're scared. They say, oh, we can't abandon the budget. What we're going to do? How are we going to pay the bonuses, motivate our salespeople? How are we going to communicate this to city analysts and so on and so forth? But the reality is that beyond budgeting is a philosophy. And let us look at us at real life implementation. Stefan and Adri, I would like to invite you to switch on your cameras. And the stage is yours. So it would be wonderful to hear your case study. We already looked at the case study of your colleagues from Sweden. So CFO of Sweden delivered presentation about experience in Europe and Sweden. It would be wonderful to see what is happening in Australia. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to really share with you our journey. And it was actually quite a journey. And you mentioned it, Larissa, it's happening everywhere at Roche at the moment. So it's really good. Before we jump into the topic, I want to provide some context, who we are as an organization, and also a little bit of context around our Agile transformation journey we've been on for the last 2 years. So we are the world's largest biotech company, and we are also the leader in personalized healthcare. We are the world leader in vitro diagnostics and tissue-based cancer diagnostics. And as a global organization, we have really very ambitious 10-year goals. One of them is to deliver twice as many medical advances at half the cost to society. Now, that's a very bold goal. And we realized as an organization that in order to achieve that, we really need to fundamentally change how we operate, but not only how we operate internally, also how we engage, how we co-create, how we collaborate with the wider healthcare ecosystem. Next slide, please. So 2018 marked really the starting point for our global business transformation, and affiliates were given free rein at a local level to decide and design and implement what is relevant and meaningful to the local environment in a style and in a pace, or at a pace that suits. We focused a lot at the beginning on mindset and behavior. We did a couple of design sprints, and one of the first design sprints was around Agile planning. And what was really exciting and empowering to us at that time was that Global had just announced that they would discontinue the old traditional budgeting planning process to give affiliates more time to work on what really matters. And Adri, you were a member of that design team. If you look back, you know, what we wanted to achieve at that time and how far we have gone, what we have achieved and where we are now, what are your reflections?
Next slide, please, Larissa. So the unique approach, thanks Stefan, to business planning in Roche Australia really required a distinct change in mindset. So with no bottom-up budget submissions, we have achieved no hoarding of resources and no spend it or lose it mentality. Instead, we now have a portfolio view aligned with affiliate strategy to prioritize opportunities, allocate resources, and assess local trade-offs, and really focus on that enterprise thinking. Next slide, please. We have saved over 190 company days in time, and over 2,700 less PowerPoint slides have been produced. So one of the key outcomes in our Agile planning transformation was to really focus on complete transparency around revenue, spend, and investments. And as you would recall from Ricard's presentation, that's also one of the cornerstones and principles of Beyond Budgeting. We achieved that by developing what we call internally our affiliate corner, where all our employees have access to any financial information. It is really important to us that all employees have a level of financial acumen and understanding, as we are all collectively responsible to run a sustainable business. Employees also have visibility of affiliate priorities and outcomes, as well as brand strategies and portfolio plans to really build knowledge and understanding.
So Adri, I remember at the beginning, you know, the thought of not having allocated fixed budgets anymore created a lot of question in the organization and also a lot of swirl. And surprisingly, you know, a lot of resistance actually came, not so much from finance, came really from the business, which was really interesting.
Absolutely. For a lot of people, having an allocated budget really gives them clarity and comfort, and knowing what they can spend and the amount that they sort of work towards. So we had to take a lot of time to explain what it means and what it doesn't mean. So a key message that we really shared with the business continuously is that it doesn't mean that you can spend whatever you want just because there is no budget.
Yeah, I think another important step we took was changing how we measure performance for both sales and non-sales functions. And also here, you know, the idea was to move away from individual targets, and we had to do a lot of education and explanation around that as well. How was that?
Yes, that's correct. So one of the biggest changes that has been implemented globally through the process was to move away from country-level targets for bonuses to a single international target for all performance-related bonuses. We have also changed and adapted our local sales incentive program, where we have removed individual targets and promoted a team goal. It was a complete mindset shift for our salespeople, moving away from rewarding individuals on results achieved with their own objectives to creating objectives that focus on how individuals get things done to further promote and encourage collaboration across the business.
So Ari, let's go back to this very first design team we had around Agile planning. And a critical component in that thinking was to have this quarterly alignment meeting with the vision that here chapter and squad leads come together on a regular basis quarterly and really scan the horizon and make short and long-term investment decisions. So looking back, what was critical for success? And also let's talk about some of the learnings and some of the failures along the way.
Next slide, please, Larissa. So yes, Stefan, so the quarterly alignment was one of the key recommendations from the Agile Planning Design Sprint. It is an ambitious replacement of existing budget and business planning meetings and forums. So the quarterly alignment for us is dynamic with enterprise thinking at its core. We really think across the affiliate and not in our silos or departmental silos anymore. Within the Roche Australia affiliate, it's an ongoing learning process for us, and we have had many learnings and failures over the last year. So some of the learnings we had was that we really needed more clarity on what decisions can be made at this meeting. So our initial approach was to let the content form organically, but we quickly learned that some structure is needed in this phase. And then probably one of our key breakthroughs was when we started setting conditions and guardrails, and that is really key for the success of the quarterly alignment. And Stefan, you will talk a little bit more around our 3C concept in a while. So, and then some of the real examples of mindset and behavior change that we've noticed over the time is in one case, a squad lead was really understanding that her initial people resource request was not the right investment choice at the time, once gaining a broader understanding of the affiliate priorities. And the second example in this space is that a squad lead proactively started looking at every dollar the squad spends and assessing whether each investment is impactful or not. So Stefan, in summary, the short answer to your first question as to what we have achieved over the last 2 years is that we've done a lot, but it has not always been easy. And I believe that that is also part of the journey, to really learn as you go along and adapt and iterate and really experiment along the way. I know it was also challenging for the leadership team. Do you want to talk us through how challenging it was to let go of some of these traditional budgeting concepts?
Absolutely. Next slide, please. So, to be honest, it was really tough. Having been working in finance for over 20 years, and all of a sudden, everything you have learned, you have practiced over the years, isn't relevant anymore. That can be quite confronting. And also realizing, back to Rickard's point, that it actually starts with us as leaders, can be scary at times. And there were times where really self-doubts kicked in, can I unlearn? Can I transform as a leader? These were questions that, on a regular basis popped into my head. And I know for my colleagues, for them, it was really the same. At the same time, there was enormous excitement about the opportunity to create something truly awesome and really unleash the power of the people and really redefine the role of business finance. So what was really helpful was a lot of good peer coaching with other leaders, within finance, but also outside finance, and just having open conversations.
Thank you, Stefan, for sharing some of your personal experience as well. What do you think was the biggest challenge for the leadership team in Australia?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for us as an enabling team, or the biggest struggle, was now that we have, self-managed teams, which can operate within given guardrails. How do we as an enabling team stay connected without falling back in old command and control behavior? And I think it was, pretty much the same, or the organization felt similar. Quite often at the beginning, when we asked a question, we would get feedback from colleagues asking, why are you asking these questions? Are you not trusting me? I thought you would empower us, and this really feels now like you are going back, to the command and control style. Next slide, please. So we defined not only guardrails in which self-managed teams can operate, and also spend a lot of time on developing the advice process. We also started to experiment with something what we call the 3C. And the 3C stand for context, condition, and commitment. So prior to the quarterly alignment meetings, during which the teams make decisions on short and long-term resource allocation, it is important that we discuss the what and the why in strategic planning to ensure that the teams are better able to prioritize, focus resources, and shape their work to deliver on the desired outcomes. And the discussions we are having around the 3 Cs, they feel so different from what we had in the past. In the past, teams would present hours and hours in front of the leadership team. They would spend hours, if not days, in creating slide decks and rehearsing their presentation. And today we are having a conversation. We are having a conversation about the major trends and changes in the environment and how that potentially will affect our strategic priorities. And it's really important in this dialogue to talk about and all agree on, that's the context for our objectives and key results. These are the conditions so that teams can really commit and align their plans to our affiliate outcomes. So, so much to the challenges for the leaders, but I know, Adri, that for the finance team, it was also not always easy, and there were also challenges along the way. So can you talk about what was challenging for the finance team and how did they manage to move from traditional budgeting and planning to agile planning?
Yes, thanks, Stefan. And next slide, please. So one of the biggest changes is that that we do not see ourselves as controllers anymore, and we do not see our department as a traditional finance department. So the role is much broader in a business advisory capacity. So in the future of business finance, the need for professionalism and rigor has not gone away. It is more important than ever. And we are still the financial custodians of the company, but in a much more proactive way. So one of the key challenges and changes for our team and the wider business was really to unlearn the reliance on the artificial crutch called the budget, and to move away from variance analysis to understanding investments and the impact they have. We've been reflecting a lot over the last 2 years, and whilst we've introduced a quarterly alignment in the affiliate corner, as we've shared, we've concluded that we are missing some concrete tools to support decision making, to really understand if we're investing for impact and to set truly ambitious targets. So this is where we've done a lot of research and reading and taken learnings from the Beyond Budgeting model and concept, which we all can agree was built on a value-based system that's very much in line with our Agile transformation that we've gone through in Roche, where it's really important to have boundaries and guidelines, which will then allow autonomy and flexibility with empowered decision making. So some of the tools that we've introduced over the time is, so the one is trend reporting and another one is investment retrospective tools. And that really helps us to understand our financials better, as we now spend a lot more time analyzing each financial decision we make and to discuss opportunities and improve and invest for impact. So where trend reporting is really useful is to break the calendar year dominance and to show investments over a period of time, rather than to compare that against a budget, a target, or a prior year. So when we removed the budgets, we found it was natural to start comparing against prior year, as variance analysis is so inbuilt in our behavior. But I think everyone would agree with us that 2020 really showed us that comparisons against prior year is meaningless, and it can really hide inefficiencies, especially if spend and investments are lower than in the previous period.
So Adri, in a way, not having budgets or allocated budgets really forced us to understand more and more the impact of our investments. And you mentioned investment retrospectives earlier. So can you share with us what that is and how the teams experimented with this methodology?
Yes, so we've implemented investment retrospectives, and that's an ongoing experiment for us where we learn and iterate and change as well. But in this space, we do both qualitative and quantitative assessments. So the retroactivity itself is really focused on activity value, where we start with qualitative so that the team doesn't fall into the mindset of greater spend equals greater impact, or that every activity is strategic. So for this, we use a very simple prioritization matrix to assess the relative impact versus relative difficulty and cost. So a key part in this is that no activity is allowed to be of equal value. And this is what really generates those robust conversations, where we start focusing on ensuring that investment is aligned to our affiliate outcomes, creating the enterprise thinking across the squads and the teams so we can deliver on the affiliate outcomes. And it really supports value-based decision-making and activity prioritization.
Thank you, Adri.
Next slide.
Was quite a journey. So let's bring it all together. This is the last slide we have, and we wanted to summarize, some of the success factors and also talk a little bit about the impact we have seen from our initiative. So we talked about leadership commitment. It all starts with that, and we talked about, how important it was, the commitment we got from global. To give each affiliate the time and space to go on their journey. We applied the same principle when we did our local transformation. So design teams worked collaboratively within clear set guardrails. There was no intervention from senior leaders other than good support and sparring. We focused a lot on mindset and behavior for a very, very long time before we even thought about changing the organization. Adri mentioned how important it is to start to experiment with the quarterly alignment example and how important it is to learn and iterate. So I think that's important too. It's not all perfect at the beginning, but that's okay as long as we iterate and build a better version of it. We talked about transparency and that with empowerment comes accountability. And I think, going back to the leadership, when you start feeling uncomfortable, I think that is probably a good sign you're doing something right. So that is, I think what key success factors really were. Adri, can you talk a little bit about the impact we've seen from that?
So just to summarize, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, we talked about the time that we've saved across the business and in finance, and that really creates the opportunity to reinvest the time to have a better understanding of our financial decisions and the impact. One of the key things that we've noticed in 2020 was that we have avoided the hockey stick effect that so often occur in Q4 spend, where people really have that use it or lose it mentality. So we moved away from that, which was a very positive change for us. We've also noticed that sandbagging in sales ambitions really slowed down. So because we now all work towards a combined target and not really individual targets anymore, there's a really key change in that space. Another big impact is that enterprise mindset, where we have really moved away from working in silos, and we are all focusing and moving towards our affiliate outcomes. So every decision is really linked to an affiliate outcome. And then one of the key things as well is faster decision making. We've got a really good example of a home infusion program that was implemented in 2020 during COVID, and the pace at which decisions was made for that to be implemented was amazing. So a really key win for us in that space. So I think this was our last slide, and we want to close our presentation with a polling question. So we have talked a lot about how important leadership commitment is when starting to implement Beyond Budgeting principles. So here is our polling question for you.
Adri, before we do polling question, I would like to ask our panelists to give their commentaries on this excellent presentation. What an example, and a very valuable example of very recent implementation. And it's interesting to see how you worked as a team. And also this is the confirmation that Beyond Budgeting, it's a philosophy, it's a cultural thing that actually relevant for the entire organization. And also another wonderful thing that finance, in particular FP&A, is so well suited to make this transformation in company. So thank you so much for sharing those interesting results with us. Very valuable. Pras, what would be your subject matter? What would be your commentary on this case study?
Yeah, so first off, great job on this. I think the key thing is that you were able to show, especially that 30% that wasn't considering beyond budget from the last poll, that it is definitely something to consider. And more importantly, it's something that is very possible. The fact that you were able to do this both locally and as well get globally and get the commitment from your leadership and such without the intervention as described. I think that was amazing. I especially loved what you guys talked about, how it was event driven. Oftentimes I feel that finance tends to look backwards, whereas you guys, it seems, really looked forward. You acted in the moment versus acting in the past. So, I think there's some great results from this that, I continue to hope hearing about it.
Thank you, Pras. Rikard, your commentary. I know that you were so much involved in implementation globally. So what would be your commentary addition to this excellent case study?
Yeah, I think there are two things in this which is very, very important. And that is, if you had listened into the Swiss digital meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago and have seen the Nordic and Swedish-based implementation, you have seen very similarities in the principles, but it would have been a bit different. And I think that's the important thing with this as well. Although that Roche has implemented sort of global principles, the local adaptation is extremely important. It needs to fit the rhythm, the culture, and the marketplace in Australia, which is very different from the Nordic countries, which might be different from China, which might be different from Latin America, which might be different from Northern America. You can utilize the same principles, but the local adaptation is extremely, extremely important. The second part of it, and I am in many aspects an advisor, and I sometimes earn money advising companies, but I think it's so important that you have strong stakeholders internally. This can never be driven by consultants or advisors only. You need to have strong internal stakeholders like Stefan and Adri in this place. That is extremely important. The other two things that I think is quite important is that what you see that Roche have experienced and the impact, it's both on the efficiency side, less slides, less time spent on, but also increased value. And there are not many projects where you actually will both utilize higher efficiency and higher value at the same time. And I think that is shown here. So great work, Stefan and Adri.
Excellent. Thank you so much, panelists and Stefan and Adri. Excellent presentation, and congratulations on your success. Excellent results. And now it's a good timing to look at the polling question. So let me launch the third polling question. We would like to understand, is your senior management ready to move away from traditional budget as a control mechanism? So please, can you start to vote? can you choose one of those that is the best description for you? No, having control is important to them. Some parts of organizations are ready to move away from those controls, or our senior leaders trust people take the right decisions. So please, can you choose the one that is the best description of your current process at the moment? So more than 50% of you voted just a few seconds. Please continue to vote. And I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing the results with everyone. Interesting. So for almost 60% of people, having control is important. Almost 60% of companies. Some parts of the organization are ready, it's 30%, and only 12% really started to move towards this direction. Audrey, what would be your commentary?
Thanks, Larissa. I would say probably one of the key things for us is that senior leadership really need to have a buy-in in this change, because there's a very big part around mindset and behavior, and that need to change to implement this. And it would be more exciting to see this poll the other way around, where our senior leaders trust people to take the right decisions, because that is really empowering.
Thank you, Audrey. Stefan, your quick commentary on the results.
Yeah, I think pretty much in line with what Audrey said. What I would add here is, it's important that leaders start to go on that journey. To be honest, when we started, or before we started, because in Australia we were actually starting a little bit behind our affiliates. And just due to the fact that I was, working for so many years in this budgeting and planning with them, I was actually very, very skeptical at the beginning. And it was only when I read Frederic Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations, where I really thought, wow, that is really interesting. So, give it a try. And here I am. But we also had senior leaders who figured, that's not my cup of tea, and and these people left the organization. So yeah.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, everyone who shared their view, their experience with us. I'm hiding the results, and we are moving to the next aspect of our today's presentations and looking at Beyond Budgeting. But before doing so, let me remind you that you can send your questions to the speakers through your text boxes. Don't worry, we will answer all of them, even if not enough time to do this online in real time. We will do this offline and we will send this to you, our answers, in a couple of days. So this is the timing now to look at the thought aspect. Technology as Beyond Budgeting enabler. We are living in these interesting times when technology really can enhance so many organizational and in particular FP&A processes. And Beyond Budgeting philosophy is one of those. We have Pras Chatterjee, Senior Director at SAP, to share with us his vision on how technology can enhance Beyond Budgeting. Pras, you're welcome. The stage is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Larissa, and thank you everyone for having me here. And I'm just going to try to connect all the dots. We've obviously talked about how the history behind Beyond Budgeting, the practical implementation, successful implementation, and let's see now how technology can bring it all together. Next slide, please. So, just in terms of how Beyond Budgeting drives more agile and predictive planning for FP&A, there's a few key facts I'd like to focus on. Many of you actually participated in the FP&A Trends survey last year, where you gave your inputs on the overall FP&A and planning process. And I think some of the things you showed were that only 26% of the time is spent on driving insights and generating and getting insights and generating these insights and driving actions. And the other things we found were that best-in-class companies produce more accurate forecasts, in 63% versus 38% in less time, 2 versus 8 days, which showed, I think, in one of the first polling questions about how much time people actually spend on plans overall. And finally, only 6% of organizations using AI, whereas the majority of organizations are considering it in 6 months or even further out. So again, there's a lot of room for improvement, and this area of improvement, I think, is really on the A and FP&A. Basically, what you can see here is we're all spending a lot of time on the financial planning, but adopting Beyond Budgeting will allow us to really accentuate and amplify the A in analysis, the financial planning and analysis. Next slide, please. So how can technology enable better or beyond budgeting? So the first part, I think, is that organizations such as yourselves can look at a cloud-based planning to drive beyond budgeting. Many organizations we work with right now are still stuck in the world of Microsoft Excel, where they're working on a grid by grid basis where only a few people understand this, and it's owned by one person in finance, and there's links and things, and it's very static and not fluid and dynamic. The key thing with the cloud-based planning tools is they can be adopted quickly. In many cases, just with the swipe of a credit card, you can basically have an enterprise-ready solution that's owned by you and finance. You don't need an IT services, a shared services agreement. You and finance can have control of a cloud-based budgeting tool that is modeled and catered to your requirements. There's also analytics to tell better stories directly in the solution as well. We live in a world often right now where many of us live by Excel, where we have grids and we only understand these grids. And we really should look at analytics to tell better stories. The analogy I often like to give is that if I want to look at my own personal banking information, I don't go to the web and download a CSV file and separate the columns. I expect my banking provider to tell me what my spending patterns and trends are with amazing and beautiful visualization. That's the same thing that your business constituents expect from you. And adopting a beyond budgeting profile whereby you're just moving away from strict variance analysis, but as the team at Roche showed, you're identifying key trends and such that analytics can tell, I think is one of the best key cases and drivers for beyond budgeting. The last piece with cloud-based planning tools to drive beyond budgeting is the collaboration in the context of your plans. I think Rickard talked about the fact that it's important to collaborate beyond finance with IT, HR, but it's beyond that as well. It's with your supply chain organization, your sales organization, a world where all of that is fluid and constructive, and it's all connected through a beyond budgeting process. A process whereby a sales plan is connected with a supply chain plan, is connected to finance. A sales plan is also connected to marketing, so they know what to spend on their campaigns and such. So again, this is very important to drive a beyond budgeting process with technology. Next slide, please. The other piece is moving towards a more agile and predictive planning process. Rickard talked about this as well. And the key thing that technology can provide, especially in this day and age, is moving away from those scheduled plans and looking at rolling forecasts. I often talk about the fact that I see FP&A focusing too much on the planning and needing to spend much more time in analysis. Often with this variance-based mantra that we subscribe to, we're sitting at the back of the boat as FP&A analysts or practitioners, stating what's already happened, stating the past, and stating the obvious. With the analysis and with the identifying key trends and such, we should be sitting at the front of the boat, giving guidance in terms of what's about to happen, why it might happen, and really being the key leaders in the organization. And technology can definitely help provide this through means such as rolling forecasts. We're continuously looking ahead versus just stating the obvious from the past. The other piece is predictive planning to uncover hidden insights. Predictive planning, machine learning, and AI are status quo with modern cloud-based planning tools. It's not, you don't need a team of data scientists, you don't need to have an advanced degree in actuarial sciences or statistics, nor do you need to understand Python. It's all there for you. The key job for you now is to identify the trends and uncover those hidden insights that predictive planning provides for you. Now, one way to provide this is, again, having these insights and really explain these insights to your business constituents and such, and also channel them so you're simulating future outcomes. The pandemic showed, especially in the last year, that it was all about outcomes. There came a time in March where you and FP&A were one of the most important people in your organization. Best-in-class organizations were able to provide simulate outcomes based on changes and disruptions in supply chain, disruptions in sales. maybe increases in costs, the impact of furloughs of employees, and being able to bring all that together and simulate those results. That's where Beyond Budgeting needs to be, and that's what technology can provide. Next slide, please. So the final point I'd like to make is, with Beyond Budgeting, it's really about aligning all of your plans with technology. The key thing, again, is, as Ricard mentioned, strategic alignment with all the departments, that you're all in a fluid process of Beyond Budgeting, that you were able to respond in the moment to market disruptions. That's something that 2020 showed. If coming from 2020, everyone here goes back to a budgeting process of 2019, we as an FP&A group and you as an FP&A department have effectively failed, because we need to be able to really think ahead, think forward, and think in terms of simulations and such. And most importantly, we need to be able to make faster and more confident decisions. As I mentioned, modern technology allows you to do this. It allows you to simulate, it allows you to use predictive analytics, and allows you to make these faster and confident decisions. So as FP&A practitioners, you're not caught in this endless loop of planning, but you're in this amazing world of analysis where you're providing direction, providing guidance, assisting with divestitures, acquisitions, the impact on different outcomes, permutations and combinations, and many, many different things. And with this, you're able to be a best-in-class FP&A department assisted with modern technology. And I believe we now move on.
Pras, thank you so much for this excellent presentation on the role of technology. It's really the main message that technology is not only creating comfortable, collaborative teams, but also it's changing the culture. It helps to change the culture from judgmental, political, to really collaborative and value-adding. So thank you for this presentation and sharing this with us. I would like to ask all our panelists to switch on your cameras and to share your view on the role of technology for implementation of Beyond Budgeting. Ricard, would be interesting to hear your view.
Yes, thank you, Larissa, and thank you, Pras, for that presentation. I often get the question when I talk to different organizations if technology is important when it comes to Beyond Budgeting. And one way of saying it, it is not important at all. The other way of saying it, it is very, very important. So the first question, it's not important at all. It's not important when you have everything in place. When the technology is there working for you, it becomes a non-issue for you. It's extremely important if you don't have the technology, because that could be a clear blocker of the transparency and making sure you can align the rhythm to where you're at, producing driver-based forecasts, etc., etc. So the answer is not very simple. It is very important when you don't have it. It becomes less important when you have it in place. So I think that is a good way of phrasing it. Another way I think is very important, and we sometimes talk about what we call a one set of numbers suite, how you can think about this. If you think about this, there are 4 ways. The first one is the one set of definitions. That's an intellectual way, that whether you have the strategic alignment with all the departments, you need to have the same definition of what an employee is between finance and HR, for instance. It's an intellectual discussion. The next 3 portions need the technology, the one set of numbers, making sure different systems talk to each other so that everybody in the organization sees the same number when you put out the report. The third part is the one set of calculations. We are talking about relative measures, KPIs, etc. Of course, the system should help you so you calculate your KPIs the same way. And third and fourth part is the one set of reports. You should have the same layout. Everybody should see the same set of reports. Although the first part is an intellectual operation, all the 3 different parts, the number parts, the calculation part, and the report part, needs good technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricard. Adri, any additions from your side?
Thank you, Pras, for the really insightful presentation. I think, the key thoughts from my part is that, as Ricard mentioned as well, if you don't have the technology in place, it can be really hard. As also mentioned in our, in our presentation, is one of the key areas where we had to focus on was to develop those tools to really help us to understand our investments better. And I'm very excited about what's happening in the space of, this SAP Cloud Analytics and the potential to implement some of that locally as well, because I think it just, it alleviates a lot of that pressures to trying to pull all this information together manually. So thank you for sharing. I think it was very, very insightful.
Thank you, Audrey. And Stefan, your commentaries, quick ones, please.
Yeah, I will make it sweet and short. Thank you, Pras. Really good presentation. I think what caught my eye was when you were talking at the beginning about that we only spend 25% of our time, driving actions and generating real insights. And, I was for many, many years one of these people who complained all the time that we spend too much time with planning. Now, in our case, luckily we got rid with all the planning activities, but we also realized there is a gap, there is a skill gap, there is a technology gap around advanced analytics and the use, to really unleash the power of the data. So we are also as a company investing in that area heavily at the moment.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Thank you, the panel, and Pras, once again. Thank you for your excellent presentation. And now this is the timing to hear from our participants. And this is our fourth polling question and the last one. We really would like to understand what is happening in your world in terms of modern technology, whether it's really starting to change the culture in your organization and you realize the full potential. Please start to vote right now and choose one of those that is the best description for this question. How do you currently use modern technology in your organization for planning, for forecasting, for decision making? Please choose one of those options. We use technology to empower and drive cultural change. We use technology primarily as a driver of efficiency, or we use technology primarily to strengthen command and control. It's also possible, isn't it? So please continue to vote. More than 50% of you voted. Just a few seconds. Please continue to do this. You still have time. Almost 60% of you voted. Just a few seconds. And I'm closing the poll and I'm sharing the results with everyone. Interesting results, by the way. Pras, what would be your commentary?
I'm not surprised. I mean, I think the key thing with technology is that obviously it drives all the activities as stated over here. Obviously, when it comes to driving efficiency, clearly that contributes to driving, further shareholder value. But obviously, based on the responses, I mean, technology isn't just a matter of efficiency. It's across the board with communication, culture change, more command and control and such. So, I'm pleased to see these numbers.
Very interesting to see these numbers, but though we have 24% of respondents that emphasize that they use technology primarily to strengthen command and control. Rikat, what would be your reaction on this?
I mean, I'm not surprised. I would like to see, how should I phrase it, the 50-50 split between the driver of efficiency, because yes, it should help us drive efficiency, but rather to empower and drive the cultural change rather than the command and control. But in many cases, that is how we use it. We use it to find variances and punish people that haven't lived up to the budget and so on. So I'm not surprised, but I would like to see a change in the future. And I think the systems that are available today could actually help us to utilize it more as an empowerment to drive cultural change.
Thank you, Rikat. Thank you to all of you who voted today and shared the results with us. I'm hiding the results. And just before the Q&A session, it's a good timing for key takeaways from our esteemed panelists. I would like to ask all of you to switch on your cameras and your microphone. And a very quick 30 seconds key takeaways from the panel. So let us start from Rikat. Rikat, 30 seconds key takeaways from today's session before we go to Q&A. And I would like to remind everyone that please send your questions. We already have a lot of them, but we can accommodate more. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think what has been very clear here that at any change, if you go to anything that similarities of Beyond Budgeting or even better budgeting, you need to think about three things. You need to think about the mindset. You need to think about the processes, and you need to think about the technology. And this will mean a difference on how FP&A professionals work in the future. It will be a new role, much more holistic, much more business acumen will be needed, and you will be a driving force actually not to change only the management processes, but also at least to influence leadership principles within your companies. So I think that is the important thing. You need to think mindset, processes, and technology as a whole to make a difference happen if you are an FP&A professional in the future. Thank you, Larissa.
Thank you, Rikard. Stefan, your 30 seconds key takeaways from the session.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned during my presentation that I was skeptical at the beginning. And as you can see, I converted from a skeptic to a believer. It has really been an exciting journey for us. And the journey will continue as we have just started, the next phase of our global transformation. And implementing Beyond Budgeting principles really, I think, enables us to finally, as FP&A professionals and finance business partners, really enables us to finally play the role we always wanted to play, if that makes sense. Rikard, you shared with us, what are the key enablers, what is helpful to get there. Adrian and I, we shared, how we got there. And Pras, you shared how technology can actually support the whole thing. Now, it's a journey. Every journey starts with a first step, and I would really encourage everyone to take the first step in the right direction. It's really worth it.
Thank you, Stefan. Adri, what would be your 30 seconds key takeaways?
Thanks, Larissa. Yeah, so for me, the key takeaways, of this presentation and the whole journey, Beyond Budgeting principles and journey, is that it's an ongoing learning experience, transformation and journey. It's not something that you implement and you just stop and it works. I don't think you can underestimate the mindset and the behavior changes that is needed to really make this successful. And we've been on this journey now for almost 2 years. And for us, it is, we learn new things every day. We change, we iterate, we re-implement. So it is that's just one thing to, to take away from this. It's super exciting and and a great experience.
Thank you, Adri. And Pras, finally, your key takeaways from this session.
I think for the 97% that spend more than 1 month doing their budgeting and forecasting, I think it's key to look at what Audrey and Stefan have done with Roche to see that this is definitely possible. That this isn't a pipe dream. This is a real company, a real organization that was able to achieve this. I think the key thing for me is that we call ourselves FP&A practitioners. We spend too much time on the planning and not enough time on the analysis. And judging from what we've seen today, and what Rikard mentioned about working in rhythm, the analysis is possible, and we shouldn't forget that because that's our main function here.
Thank you so much, Pras. Thank you, all the panelists. And we are ready for Q&A session now. It's a good timing. And I would like to remind everyone that we're receiving a lot of questions. I already see that we wouldn't be able to answer all of them because of the time limitations, but we will get back to you after the meeting with our answers. So the first question is to Rikard. Very interesting question. What is your experience, Rikard, on one single target? How do you still drive performance of smaller markets that do not have the size to influence the overall results? So you have experience from Swedish and from Australian markets. So what would be your answer on this?
Yeah, first of all, I think we need to set a completely different mindset on what the target is. Is there actually a way of defining an exact number target for anything? Perhaps we should talk about targets like being better than yesterday, being better than last year, being better than competitors, or sometimes even actually talk about doing things better, even if the result actually will not come this period or anything like that. So I think that the first way is looking very differently at targets. Put them in relation to others, put them in relation to yourself, rather than an absolute numbers. So the So looking at if the trend is right might be more important than to meet that exact absolute numbers. And also one thing that is quite important, and that we talk a bit philosophically about, do you actually need financial targets in an organization? Or is it good enough to have loads of other measures? And why I'm saying that is we shouldn't shy away from that. Finance is always the end point of things happening. Market shares, or good prices, or employing the right people, or being innovative in your product development, etc. So you might be setting targets at those holistic levels and let the finances be the finances, because you cannot set finance targets without doing things different in your operations. So why don't set even targets at the operational level and let the finances be the finances? Thank you.
Thank you, Rikard. Excellent answer. The next question is to you, Audrey. To change from hierarchical to shared leadership, what kind of new competencies needed to be in finance team? What is your experience with this?
Yes, so that there's a lot of changes that need to happen, and again focusing on that mindset and behavior piece, because you really need to build the confidence within the team and within the wider organization to truly understand that financials, and to build the competencies. We spend a lot of time sharing, doing leadership training, focusing on coaching our teams and our chapters and squads, to really then being able to understand all the information that is provided. So yes, there's large elements of coaching involved. And again, as I think as we've said a couple of times, it's really an ongoing journey to help people to get along on this way. One of the key things that we did early on in our transformation was to recommend for everyone to read the book that Stefan referenced as well, Reinventing Organizations, from Frederic Laloux, because that really explains this whole concept of self-managed teams and how that, how you operate and how you work, and how people take accountability and empowerment. Another key aspect of this is to then have your senior leadership team in that mindset of vulnerability as well, and really to empower the teams and being willing to accept that there might be failures along the way, and that people, that they have to be willing to accept that we are experimenting, we're iterating, we're learning, and not everything will be on a perfect PowerPoint slide like maybe it has been in the past. So we focused a lot around that MVP concept, where where everything doesn't have to be perfect, more the 80-20 rule.
Thank you, Audrey. The next question is to you, Stefan. What kind of pushback did your company face when you changed the incentive system from a local scope to global scope? The push would normally come from the exceptional performance. So this is the guess. So can you share very quickly what was your experience and answer to this question?
Yeah, I think that was, it was of course a long discussion and conversation, and we did not change that in one go overnight, right? So, and it was also managed differently for non-sales functions and sales functions. So for non-sales functions, we moved pretty early actually to our global international performance metric. Whereas we took a little bit longer for this change for our sales commercial function, but we have done that step here as well. I think what helps here is actually to connect it back to what is our mission, right? And we are really changing the way we see ourselves as an organization. We really want to put a lot of focus on, how we show up in the marketplace, not just selling our products, but really driving together and co-create with our partners a better healthcare system together. And I think if you connect it then to the mission, then people understand, just measuring an individual sales target is in that context really not helpful. What is much more helpful is looking at, how did teams actually show up, and how did they work together, and what did they achieve collectively. So I think a lot of discussion and a lot of explanation is required to move things.
Excellent, thank you, Stefan. For us, the next interesting question is to you. There is no doubt about how technology can enhance the process, but how to do with those organizations that actually enhance their command and control mechanism with the new technology? What would be your vision? What would be your recommendation to avoid it?
So, I mean, this is obviously a very philosophical discussion, right? I mean, I think we all agree that the whole purpose of Beyond Budgeting is to move away from this command and control mentality. The purpose of technology is really to, act in the moment and to make decisions and recommend decisions that are happening now versus sticking to a world of, traditional variance analysis. You have an actuals column, a budget column, then you have a variance, then you explain your variances. That doesn't really add much value. I mean, I think that is possible, but if you really want to deploy technology to be a bridge between the two worlds, maybe if it's a matter of starting with that kind of deployment where you are, you have your variances, but to move beyond the variances, dig into the variances, assess the impact of the variances going forward and what might happen. So it's not just a matter, it's maybe straddling the world of looking back, but also 1 foot forward to look ahead as well.
For us, definitely it's a philosophical question, and thank you so much for sharing your view on this. With this, I would like to close our Q&A session for the reason that we don't have enough time to answer so many questions that are coming. But this is the indication of a great interest, and definitely the world is different. We all understand that traditional budgeting doesn't work anymore. And before we say thank you to everyone, I would like to remind everyone, first of all, there were some questions already how to look at the previous examples of Roche presentation in Sweden and how to look at the articles at FP&A Trends group website. You can find all of that information. But let me remind you about our upcoming meetings. It's logical to have the next webinar on the subject of rolling forecast, because rolling forecast is one of the mechanisms that could be used for implementation of Beyond Budgeting. So the links are here, you can start registering. And a quick announcement about our partnership with AFP for FinNext Asia conference, digital conference, and the great news that it would be absolutely free. It would be a great learning experience, speakers from around the globe, and the registration process started. So while we still have places, please, if you can join us for this. And finally, I would like to say thank you so much to our sponsor, SAP. Thank you for making this possible for us. I would like to say thank you so much to all of you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your answers to polling questions, for your Q&A, and thank you so much for being with us and moving FP&A to the next level. And finally, our dear panelists, what an exceptional panel, really world-class presenters, interesting case studies, visionaries, thought leaders. Adri, Stefan, Rikard, Pras, thank you so much from FP&A Trends Group and from our whole global community. Thanks a lot. And please stay in touch. And when we finish this presentation now, this FP&A, digital FP&A board, there will be an opportunity for you to share your feedback with us. Please share, it's very important for us to understand how we can improve it. Thank you, stay safe. And finally, I really hope that we will start face-to-face meetings in Asia and in Australia from July. So hopefully we will see you soon. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.